"So I'll see you after the party?" asked Max, spreading his arms wide. "Sure, have a good vacation," I wished my comrade and patted him on the back. "So, maybe you'll come to the bus station with me?" "No, I have a bus. I decided to buy presents for my parents." "Suit yourself. Okay, I'm off. Have a good trip, you too." I waved goodbye to my friend. As soon as the door closed behind him, I began to slowly pack my things. I don't like it when someone is around. I start to forget things. Everything falls out of my hands, and in general it becomes uncomfortable. It's still only noon. Of course, I could have come early to my relatives, but the presents are already bought, and I wanted to enjoy the solitude. I'll be alone for a while and then I'll go. Half an hour alone flew by quickly, and then I grabbed my bag with things and went out the door at 7 in the evening. The bus slowly pulled away from the stop and took me towards home. I stuck my headphones in my ears, turned on my favorite music, and enjoyed the scenery. Holiday signs wishing Merry New Year and Merry Christmas, and crowds of people scurried here and there. I was in a good mood, just looking at it all. I wondered if Mom and Dad had already decorated the house. I thought about it, and noted in my mind that we had already left the city. We had about an hour and a half to go. I was already thinking that it would be good to eat. It would be good to think about it beforehand, but I was hungry now. But nothing, I'll be home soon and my mom will cook something tasty, I thought, and then the bus slowed down sharply. One man couldn't resist and fell down, after which we heard indignant voices from the whole cabin. The driver got out of the cab without explaining anything. Anxiety among the passengers grew more and more. "Here we are." Angry driver. "What do you mean we're here? Where are we going? You can call a cab or wait for the technical support to come." "And how long should we wait for this technical help?" one of the passengers asked. "An hour for sure." "Ugh!" All the passengers, including me, came to the stop. The cold wind was blowing in my face. I wanted to get home as soon as possible. I should call my dad, have him pick me up. With these thoughts, I reached into my pocket and took out my cell phone. And how disappointed I was when I saw that there was no connection. Meanwhile, the people who were standing with me at the bus stop started to leave. I asked some of them if they were going to take another bus, to which I got the following answer. "No, it's a half-hour walk from here to my village." Well, I thought, why don't I walk too? Not all the way to the village, of course, but at least to get a connection. And it's a bit cold to stand in the cold. I walked, sometimes looking at the phone screen, but there was no connection. Now I regretted that I had gone alone to the middle of nowhere. Well, maybe I could catch a hitchhiker. Not 15 minutes later, I heard the sound of an engine behind me. I turned around to face the source and saw the bus. I didn't think it was going straight to my village, but I could get some distance on it. I waved at the bus and it slowed down. I can't believe it. I haven't seen one of these in years. I didn't think they were still around. Meanwhile, the old bus rolled on its side and slowly opened its doors in front of me. Like a fool, I got on and didn't even pay attention to the stop sign. "Does it go to Haynes?" "It does," the driver said in a monosyllabic voice. I paid the fare and noted that the cabin was almost empty. There was a homeless man sleeping peacefully by the front door, and he gave off such an ineffable odor that I decided to sit farther away. And right at the tail end of the salon sat two men in some old-fashioned clothes. I sat down and I didn't notice how I fell asleep. I woke up to the driver shouting, "End of the line!" And then I jumped up from my seat and rushed to the exit. My village was the terminus, but probably not on this route. I looked around me a few times and then realized my mistake. I immediately ran my hand into my pocket, and the ground fell away from under my feet. There was no cell phone in my pocket. Oh, someone stole it from me while I was sleeping. Why don't I ask the driver? But I was in for a disappointment. When I ran back to the bus, the driver was gone. Right. We'll have to find someone. I started looking around me. Maybe I'm dreaming. The environment around me wasn't quite realistic or anything. Everything was dilapidated, and it looked like there wasn't a soul around. Where was he taking me? I wonder what kind of village this is. Well, I'll walk along the street. Maybe I'll meet someone, so I did. As I walked along the path, I found a man walking behind me. He was walking strangely. On the one hand, he kept his distance, and on the other, he kept up with me. Assessing the situation, I gradually increased my pace, but that pursuer who was walking behind me did not lag behind. Then I had nothing else to do but to run. so I ran. I thought I should knock on the nearest house and ask for help. But fear was driving me forward. A strange, strange fear. Maybe it was just a man going about his business. I don't think so. Gradually, I realized that several other men had caught up with me. Their number only grew, and the more there were, the more fear took hold of me. I cast a fleeting glance at the windows of the houses and saw something that made me even more frightened. The faces of the locals were staring at me through the glass, but I shouldn't have hesitated. I felt myself losing ground under my feet and flying downward. I took a bad fall. My shoulder hurt badly, and I was grabbed by my legs and dragged along the ground like a sack of potatoes. I tried to resist, but was kicked in the head and passed out. At the sight of the whitewashed ceiling and a lone bulb sticking out on a thick black wire, a picture of recent events immediately began to emerge in my memory. For a few seconds, I frantically tried to figure out what to do next, but I didn't have time. Someone entered the room. Because of the darkness, it was very difficult to see the face of the person who entered. I'm awake. What's going on? I shouted, frightened. Don't be afraid and don't yell so loud. You're lucky I brought you into my house and not someone else. My name is Dakota, by the way. Okay, Dakota. Now please tell me what happened to me. I asked the stranger. You got on the wrong bus too, didn't you? I realized almost immediately what he was talking about and asked, Did you find out about the bus? He sat down on the edge of the bed, rubbed his face with his hands, and began his story. In general, 2 weeks ago, I was going to my relatives. I knew the road so badly, and my sister asked me to stop for some reason in a neighboring village. I don't even remember there. Of course, I got off at the right stop, but I didn't get to the final destination. I remember standing, freezing. It was still frosty outside, so cold that I felt cold to the bone. I see a bus coming up ahead. The village I needed was indicated on the signs. I got on and almost immediately fell asleep, and when I woke up, you found yourself here. I was taken, like you, by the most adequate local. I had to interrupt him. What do you mean, taken? Briefly. If someone else had grabbed you, it would have been a lot worse. In what way? Listen to me carefully. I've only been here a couple weeks and I already know some things, but not everything. What exactly this settlement is, I have no idea. I'll tell you one thing, there are only 2 normal people here and they're both in this house, so you have to prepare yourself for some disgusting and frightening things to happen here. Like what? I'll tell you. This doesn't seem to be an ordinary village. There's a chief and he's worshipped by the locals. It's neither human nor animal. I don't know what it is. It looks like a scarecrow. Its body is made of wood, straw, and other junk. It doesn't look particularly frightening, but appearances are deceiving. It's the reason all kinds of crazy stuff happens around here. What? What are you talking about? I asked, perplexed. Listen to me. About once every 10 days, one of the inhabitants is sacrificed to this chief. I don't know on what principles they choose him. It can be an old man or a young man. It doesn't matter what sex. The last one was slaughtered a couple of days ago, so you can sleep well for a few more days. What's so wild? What are we even doing here? Come on, get up and let's get out of here. What's so wild? I don't know. It's not easy to get out of here. When I got here, I was taken in by one of the locals. His name was David. He took me to his house and told me all about how things work. Basically, if you leave the house and wander aimlessly around the neighborhood, the locals will realize it and tie you up. And that's what would have happened to you today if it hadn't been for me. And then, most likely, they'll bring you straight to the scarecrow, and he will not be stingy with abuse and order them to punish you in some way. But they might not. Sometimes they'll take it out on somebody themselves, and if the villager doesn't get behind you, you'll run into, shall we say, other guards. What kind of guards? There are dogs around the village, and they're not your average dogs. Very tall and aggressive. They don't look like domestic dogs at all. Wait, I don't get it. Dogs? Okay. Can't you throw them a bone or something? You think you're the only smart one? You've been here before, you want to know why they were here? No, thanks, I got it. Where's this David now? They took him to the chief last week. The realization of what was happening made me dizzy. I lay back down on the pillow and asked the question I wanted to know. So you and I ended up in a settlement with some kind of psycho or something who worships a creature not of our world? Yeah, that's right, he answered. What else do you know? David said this place is kinda cursed. According to him, a witch used to live here, and she somehow brought a common scarecrow to life. It's been a settlement ever since. Newcomers get here just like us, and so slowly the population changes. People don't live here for long." He was silent for a few seconds and opened his mouth to speak again, but there was noise outside, and the noise attracted our attention. We both went to the window, and a strange picture began to unfold in front of us. Several people confidently surrounded some man. He restlessly turned his head to the sides and even made an attempt to escape from the circle, but he was held back. I prepared for the worst, but what happened next I was somewhat confused. While some were holding the poor man down, others were giving him something to drink. Eventually he just started choking on it. "What are they doing?" I turned to Dakota. "Whatever they can think of." The first time I saw two of them hit, the others watched and yelled happily. The next events unfolded as follows. The captured man was stripped naked, stripped of everything he had, shivering from the cold. But for some reason he didn't call for help, didn't try to run away. Instead, he opened his mouth and let out a long howl. "What?" I asked a question. "I told you they weren't themselves." Dakota answered with a shrug. In the meantime, a woman had brought out 2 zinc buckets from the neighboring house. I think they were filled with something, for she was carrying them with difficulty. She put both buckets next to other people and gestured at them. Some grandfather standing nearby picked up the bucket and doused the poor man generously. I was able to see that the ice began to melt in the place where the poor man was. "Is that boiling water?" Dakota asked. "It looks like it." After a second bucket of water was poured on the man, the life left him. He convulsed for a few minutes, and after a while he passed out. I watched the whole thing like I was under hypnosis. As soon as they dragged the man's corpse away, I screamed, "Quiet! You want them to come after us?" Dakota gritted his teeth. "What kind of people are these? They're not people. They're just a shell. You can't even call them crazy. I saw them gouge out a young girl's eyes once. I don't even remember what it was about. Are those the orders from the man in charge?" Something like that. The guy was probably just out for a walk. Although David did tell me one curious thing before he died. "What's that?" "Well, the more you're in here, the more you start to lose your mind. He'd been here for 3 months. He was already losing his memory, committing acts to his own detriment, and generally losing more and more of his humanity every day. And one day, he was caught just like that. So as long as we're not completely out of our minds, we're safe? Yes and no. We don't know what they're up to. I haven't heard of anyone coming in here without asking, though. You know, I still think there's a way out. Have you tried driving out of here?" Dakota grinned, then said, "I'm surprised at you. Do you really think you're the only one who thought of that? And what came out of it?" "Nothing. There's hardly any transportation. I think there's only a few buses for the whole village. And you can't get to those. Isn't there anything we can do? We should think about it. One head is one head, as they say, but 2 heads are better." Later, Dakota and I had dinner and went to bed. Well, sleep. He fell asleep on the bed and snored while I went from corner to corner thinking about an escape. Yes, the locals are aggressive. There's no arguing that. But don't forget that they're stupid. Not all of them, of course, but most of them. The dogs were much worse. I've heard that dogs are afraid of loud noises. Although that's debatable. I don't think hunting dogs would be afraid of gunshots. And, as I understand it, they are not exactly ordinary dogs, and it's stupid to go at them with bare hands. In the end, I wondered why no one had set fire to that scarecrow yet. Probably couldn't get near it either. Dakota must have woken up before I did because the dishes were clattering in the kitchen. I didn't lie in bed, but went straight to him. "Do you want breakfast?" he asked me from the doorstep. "Yes, may I?" "Why, I don't have much choice," he said, and put a pan of fried potatoes on the table. Already at breakfast, I told him that it would be good to arm myself with something. "And what you want to do?" "Well, there's a few options." "Like what?" "Did you take a good look around your house?" "Not really." "Why?" "Why?" "We could use something." Dakota threw his fork noisily onto the skillet and asked a little irritably, "So we can get mobbed? You don't seem to be living in peace. Are you waiting until you're out of your mind? And then you'll have one way out of here," I said, and raised my finger up. "All right, tell me what you've got in mind." He said tiredly, and I told him that it would be a good idea to look around the house first, and only then resort to one of the options. We decided not to stall, and immediately after breakfast, we began to look around the house and grounds. We managed to find an axe, a sickle, a pitchfork, and Dakota had some incendiary mixture stashed away. No one was going to walk around the village with a pitchfork because we didn't want to attract attention. I hid the sickle in my pocket and Dakota hid the axe and special incendiary mixture in case we couldn't manage with other means. It was decided to go out at night because the locals were at home at that time and it would be easier to get away from here. As darkness fell, I grew more and more anxious. It was clear from Dakota's words how things really were, but we were about to find out for ourselves. I grabbed a couple knives from the kitchen, just in case. Not the best weapon for fighting evil, but it might come in handy. Dakota walked ahead of me. He walked with confidence. I wouldn't even say he was scared. 2 weeks here must be paying off. I followed him. He led us through the vegetable gardens. The main street was dangerous, the snow crunched treacherously under our feet, and the further we went forward, the more often the lights came on in the windows. Well, let's run before they grab us, I suggested, to which Dakota silently started to run. I followed him, noting that it wouldn't be easy. The snow was quite deep and I had to make some effort to cover the distance. After a while, I realized that my acquaintance was not mistaken. We were indeed met at the outskirts by 2 huge dogs. They were not friendly at all and quickly rushed towards us. Dakota, not thinking long, threw a bottle of mixture at one of them. It hit the target, and the dog scurried around trying to knock the flames off his fur, but it was unsuccessful. We took advantage of this and ran on. I rejoiced and already stopped to catch my breath as I saw a terrible picture. A huge crowd was following us. I realized that neither with axe nor sickle nor kitchen knives we would not be able to fight them off. We could only run forward. Soon we were pretty exhausted and the crowd kept up. "How long will they run after us?" I asked, shouting. "I have no idea," Dakota answered. "What's over there?" I asked, pointing forward. "Oh no," he shrieked out of breath. I immediately realized why. It wasn't so obvious in the darkness, but as we got closer, the silhouettes of the people were more and more distinct. The villagers weren't as dumb as I'd thought. Some waited ahead of us while others ran after us. Dakota stopped. You could tell by his look that he was worried. I ran forward. "Wait, where are you going?" he shouted after me, but I didn't listen. Instead, I ran as close as I could and, without waiting to be knocked down, pulled a bottle out of my pocket, flicked it on my lighter, and threw it right at the scarecrow. A multitude of concerned voices merged into one. The whole crowd ran at me, but not in time. The explosion, then the blazing fire silenced them. And then something began to happen that I still can't explain. The scarecrow caught fire lightning fast, and then there was just a deafening scream of pain and despair. Then I couldn't see anything, literally nothing but flames and darkness. My ears buzzed. I fell to the cold ground from unconsciousness. I regained consciousness at the hospital. I was told that Dakota and I were found 20 kilometers from the terminus. He doesn't remember how he got there, because he had to go to a completely different place. We were found near an abandoned village that had been deserted for 30 years. We were found lying not far from each other. We found the place of fire and burnt pieces of wood and a few bundles of straw.